Hey guys, it's Lauren and welcome back to the RocketJump Film School Office Hours podcast, and today we're doing a follow-up to our Harnessing the Sun video with John Salmon, director of photography. He's done Video Game High School, he worked on RocketJump the show and a bunch of our different shorts. We're going to talk about what we learned doing the actual tutorial, and we kind of get off on a little bit of tangent on our favorite things about lighting and the human face and things we're excited about coming up, specifically low light. So hope you guys enjoy.
RocketJump Film School, Scene 1, Apple, Take 1, Mark.
Puppy pause, 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 puppy pause.
Hey guys, welcome back to the RocketJump Film School podcast Office Hours. Today we are talking to director of photography John Salmon, who has shot all our prettiest stuff. We have Video Game High School, we have Skyhook, we have RocketJump the show, like all the cool stuff. And you guys will probably know John from our Harnessing the Sun video, where we showed you how to use sunlight to your advantage. So we just wanted to do a follow-up and kind of answer your questions and talk about what we did on that. So, like, you were the one who brought the idea up first, right?
Yeah. I mean, I want to do a lot more things like this with RocketJump Film School, and where it came from, and where any topic like I have an idea for comes from, is what's something that's really useful that like a layman to cinematography doesn't think about. In this case, it was just like literally paying attention to the path of the sun, like thinking about it, because so many people just kind of go out and they film and they're like, why does it look like a professional movie? And it's like, well, there's details you can pay attention to that by paying attention to them don't cost you anything, but that can really benefit you, you know, just to have them in your mind. So that was the original reason, is just getting people to think about it. Yeah.
I was never told that directly in film school. Like it's something I've learned through trial and error of like, this doesn't look right. Why doesn't this? Oh, the light's not where I want it.
Right.
Why is that? Okay, so it's like, oh, duh. So I'm glad we're telling people now, so they don't have to go through it. I have so many crappy looking early videos.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was cool. It's like when John, you first pitched the idea, and even just having worked with you for so many years with 5SF, like the amount of stuff you can accomplish with just like a sheet or a bounce board,
right?
And the infinite ways that you can use those two things to great result. And a lot of people, again, like you say, don't even think about it, or could and should benefit from these things because you could apply it to anything.
Are there any cool examples that you use the stuff we talked about, like in 5SF, or Dude Boat Party is another thing that you worked on, which was kind of rad. But you guys are always like, 5SF was on low budget, fast run and gun type stuff.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. 5SF.
I always thought of how great and convenient it was, because on the 5SF deck there's that grading thing over there. What do you call it? This wood.
Trellis or?
Yeah, it's like a wood awning.
Yeah.
Like that. It's sort of transparent. There's like, you know, it's not a full roof, but we can easily just clamp up a sheet to diffuse the light coming down onto the deck. And I always thought that was a unique and unique feature. Wait, unique?
Unique.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But it was a nice, easy way to just clamp something up without using any stands or something like that. It was just like it was already like a pre-rigged, like 12 by or something like that you'd throw up.
Yeah.
And like a few, I always thought the first time I saw it was like when, just give me some more steroids one, where they're out on the like restaurant.
Right.
Yeah, on the deck there.
Could I have some steroids on my salad? Oh, I'll take some too.
Give me some f***ing steroids!
Yeah, you can use diffusion to make things more flattering. We just have an overhead like that. I mean, I remember, if you want to talk about like lighting for 5SFs, the thing is we would always get together on a Sunday and just sort of shoot when people were available, which happened to be the middle of the day, so you had to be resourceful. I remember there was one we did called War Horse that was like a parody of War Horse.
Oh, God.
that we deliberately shot like right at sunset.
One day, son, she'll be yours.
Is that a carrot? I love carrots.
Yeah.
So it made it look really nice.
It's for Oscar week.
Yeah.
You had to make it look like a Spielberg film, you know.
Exactly.
I loved the beauty lighting on Brian in this terrible wig with terrible makeup.
Just a ghastly thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was great. It was great.
He went for it.
So what are, like, like kind of jumping into it, you know, kind of reviewing some of the stuff we talked about. There's diffusion, but there's also reflectors. We talked about DIY stuff, going to Home Depot. Like, how often do you go to Home Depot?
I don't.
There are a lot, actually.
Whenever I have something like really crazy, these days it's when I have something really crazy I want to build. You know, like if you want to create an eye light, there's stuff you'll do sometimes it's custom where like you want to have a whole bunch of light bulbs in an array and it creates the most beautiful eye light or something like that. And, like people still do that. They'll like Roger Deakins still builds lights randomly, you know, with construction paper and stuff like that, just to create a certain look.
You guys should check out his forums because he puts up almost everything, like how he builds stuff, what materials he uses, and he answers questions. Like you can talk to Roger Deakins,
and he answers like all the questions. Like you can go on there and ask him anything, like what diffusion
really
you use, and he's like, yeah, I use this one. Like it's awesome. We were more talking about the Home Depot thing because the mentality was like, you and I use diffusion, we use 12 buys, we use all these things that are frankly not accessible to most people across the country, especially people who are in high school and are trying to do it for under like $30, you know, or do it really on the cheap. And I just remembered how I think a big thing that seems to be an overarching moral, especially of the camera department of RocketJump Film School, that I'm noticing is like, stop thinking that you need this really expensive thing to make a great film. You know what I mean? Like to create great lighting. Like, you know, I in the back of my car, I keep a show card, like a white show card that saved my butt like a million times, just because like, just as you know, like just a little bit of something can make a world of difference. You don't necessarily need to shell out for the $10,000 light. You actually have an 18K available to you every single day. It's called the sun. Like you just have to pay attention to where it is and shoot at the right time of day. So it's just about being resourceful. Yeah.
I remember on set of when we were shooting Harnessing the Sun, on set being just our day at the park, which was lovely. But Sean Dixon, who was our DP for the actual tutorial of the thing, like started to really fall in love with the bed sheet again, you know? and he's like, wow, you actually get great results from the bed sheet.
Stop using the bounce. Use the sheet. It looks way different. I really liked it.
Yeah, he really started to fall in love with that bed sheet again.
It was a little soft.
Yeah, I remember. Like he was like, whatever tools you have available to you on like an actual film set, like sometimes it's much nicer to go back to.
Sometimes the simplest option is the best option.
Yeah, exactly. That plays into get that notion of like you don't need the expensive thing to and I could see that happening like on the spot with Sean. Yeah, it was really nice.
Oh, let's throw it over to our producer Cherish over here. We also want to answer your questions. We read every comment that pops up on our videos. So like what's one of these?
So Rob T Films, I know John, you and I both jumped on to answer this in the comments, but it's a good question. What if it's just you and a couple of friends in a tripod, and you and your friends are the main actors in the movie? Do we have any tips for Rob?
So how do you have all this, you know, these tools, and you don't have anybody to hold them? I guess is the question.
Yeah. I mean, if we're saying that we're down to, you know, all the people who are participating in this are acting in front of the camera, and maybe there's one person just rolling the camera and that's pretty much it, then yeah, you're right. It's going to be hard to actually have bounces and stuff like that in there, and you don't have equipment. I don't expect you to. The best answer I can say is like try to shoot towards more ideal times of the day. Like, you know, you can, if you look into, for example, towards the sun when the sun is setting, you automatically get like a natural contrast, like a rim light around them. And that's already really kind of beautiful. There's a lot of value to just paying attention to the way light is naturally in the world, and I think a lot of DPs can miss that. You get so busy trying to manufacture your light that you don't notice that, like, wow, when the light comes through that curtain at this time of day, it's absolutely gorgeous. You know, like it leaves this pattern on your face, and like you can, you know, so there's a lot of ways you can just use existing natural light. You know, most photographers that I admire, all they have is really a camera. You know what I mean? Like they don't have a massive crew half the time, and that's just about paying attention to what's already sort of there. But the same as sort of what the moral of the video was, that like if you want something that's picturesque, you generally want to lean towards the first 3 hours of light in the day or the last 3 hours of light in the day. So if you can schedule your scenes to be around then, that'll help.
Also pay attention to your location. Like we have a 30-second teaser up for the Hulu commercial, and we shot at a very specific time of day. One, because most of the street was in shadow, but then the sun was hitting the other building
Right.
and creating a natural huge bounce,
Right.
like bigger than we could rent or fabricate at all. And it was creating this nice fill light just on the entire street. And so that's something me and my gaffer noticed, and we're like, okay, ideal time of day, 4 p.m. on or 3:30 and on. And we had like maybe 1 or 2 hours max to get the perfect lighting there.
Right.
But we couldn't really light for that whole entire street. It was 130 feet of track
Right.
on a dolly with 3 million things happening, and we couldn't really light all of that. So using a natural bounce off of a building that was already there
Yeah.
super helped.
Yeah.
And then I remember one of my favorite stories you had was, I think it was on VJHS, where there was a specific reflection off of a car that hit it was a Joanna's face or something.
Oh, yeah.
That lasted like 15 seconds during the day or something.
Yeah.
What was that?
Let's see, a reflection off of a car.
Or window or...
Yeah, well, I remember that there was something where, here was the story, and that wasn't actually the sun, but it's an example of sort of how accidents and things that can happen with light are often really rewarding. One of my favorite ones was we were trying to film this scene it was Ellery trying out for the, I gotta think about this, RPG, maybe Shane Pizza RTS would be RTS.
Yes. Real-time strategy.
Real-time strategy.
Yes.
Okay. So it was when Ellery's it was when Key Swan was trying to crash the RTS classroom, and we were trying to light this wide shot of her waiting in the audience, and we wanted to make her look kind of alone, and we were like in the middle of trying to put up like a soft fill and point it at her, and my gaffer Justin was like panning a light, and he was in the middle of panning it, and then like there was a spill coming off of the side of like a 2K, and it just created this one long streak that went across Ellery's face and went stop. Because we just saw, like don't do anything, because like this weird kind of accident just happened that was just beautiful. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't something I could have designed. It was just something that just sort of happened.
It's the fall off between the barn doors.
It was literally the idea of doing like a streak of light that just kind of cuts across as if it was coming out the back of a projector,
right,
that lights her face, but then it falls back off. And
nice.
so you, rather than having just a soft wrap, you have a very specific contrast. I don't know, and it just sort of made sense. But you get a lot of accidents like that.
Happy accidents.
Yeah. I think what happened in the cafeteria once was like we were trying to figure out where a light was coming from, and you had to do all this like reverse math where like, okay, I see a glint coming off of that glass window over there, and the window goes to, oh my god, it's a windshield, you know, like, and that's where the sun is.
Yeah.
And then you just put up and that's where grips are amazing, is you would just put up a flag in one very specific place. It doesn't seem to make any sense, but it fixes the problem, you know.
Yeah. That's
yeah.
I like that, reversing where sources are from so you can isolate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, if you really do need to go back to the original question, sorry, I like tangented off,
That's
but
okay.
like, a lot of times you can cheat with like, if you're doing a close-up, have your actor hold a white card just off screen, like hold their own bounce. I know, and then I see a lot of like headshot photographers and photographers holding like, they're holding the camera here and they're holding their reflector like off here, and they're holding it. I mean, like you could use a selfie stick now too, or like those little clampy things, and just hold it off to the side.
Right.
But I mean, anything you could grab. Like I remember you can grab like a ladder off from your dad's garage and tape stuff or clamp stuff. You can buy clamps from Home Depot for $1, and like it doesn't have to be professional. If it works, it works.
Right. Absolutely.
Works, it works.
Yeah.
We tied the sheet to the camera tripod. Like Sean
Right.
tied it to the camera tripod because we didn't have enough people to hold the sheet during one take, because we were holding the backdrop so it wouldn't flutter in the wind.
Yeah.
And then whoever was behind the backdrop was also holding the sheet, I think. We also had the same problem.
Yeah, it's just you tie something off and then someone else like holds the other end or something like that. And you just
Your
make it
actor
all
is
work.
like holding it back here and you can't tell, and
There's something I want to say about that too. There's a movie coming out called The Revenant that's supposedly going to be shot entirely natural light, like with the existing light that's there, not even a bounce. And part of the production problem they've had is that they've taken a really long time to shoot it because they're demanding natural light. You know, like we're not going to shoot until this light is exactly in this place, which is cool. Which is, you know, like I'm behind. And I can't wait to see what this movie looks like. But I only say that in order to get across the idea to you that like the reason we use all this film equipment mostly in movies, in addition to creating a certain kind of light, is because we have this many pages to hit per day. So we have to be able to recreate, as you know, like sunset light when we're shooting in the middle of the day, like we're shaping it. But my point is, if it's you shooting with a few friends, you have the option to shoot it whatever time of day you want. You're not going to be burning a ton of money, I assume. Like
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
You shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You don't have you don't have
Get a
someone
light.
like going like, gosh, we gotta speed this along, blah,
Right.
blah, yeah.
Yeah, you can just sort of make it work with the environment you have. So why not pay attention to that?
The only thing
Yeah.
speeding you along is, of course, the sun. Everyone's
Exactly.
like racing to like get it before it goes down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Lighting allows you to have sunset for 8 hours instead of 30 minutes.
Exactly.
Whereas, like, you could shoot an entire movie in 30-minute chunks
Mm-hmm.
throughout, like, The Revenant probably did, like,
Right.
certain, like...
There's apparently a lot of that. Yeah.
There's two things I want to ask you about. Since we're talking about this, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, is movies that you would watch for sound design or for costuming. So, what movies do you think also are good to take a look at for maybe shooting in natural light or good
Right.
outdoor scenarios?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Like that, because like that's been a constant theme, is like to also educate people on like how these people have done it. Like Revenant is natural light, but when I was in high school and it was a big buzz was New World,
Right,
like
New
New
World.
World. New World was shot in natural light.
I feel like the whole Malik collection, you could probably look at that mostly in terms of natural light. The
Right.
Tree of Life to me is a gorgeous example. The way they use the sun in that movie. And, yeah, and it's the same exact case as The Revenant. Actually, I think that's sort of where Chivo picked it up, was the Tree of Life. The DP on Tree of Life also shot The Revenant. But yeah, it is something where you generally do have to wait it out. Even on the Hulu show, we both experienced this recently. Like, you have to just sort of warn your AD, like, hey, we're going to be sitting around for like 2 hours. And like, for people who like want to have really efficient capture, that can be really frustrating. But you just have to warn them, like, we're not going to shoot until 4:30. You know what I mean? We had to do that with a few Magic Hour shots on the Western this season, and yeah. And so that's part of that's the trade-off with natural light, is you do have to time it right.
Be prepared.
Yeah.
Like you were saying with Days of Heaven, they just would rehearse until that time when they would shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there, you can be productive while you're waiting. There's rehearsal, there's rehearsing camera movement, there's tests. I don't know. But so there is ways to make that time productive, but it is kind of a trade-off of like, you better know what's happening the second that light hits. So
The other thing I want to ask, which we had in the video for a brief moment but then cut, was of course overcast. So if you want to talk about overcast lighting.
Yeah. So as much as lighting for the sun is using hard light is about contrast, and shaping it and using it just the right way on the face. Overcast is difficult because in a truly overcast scenario, there's not really any shadows at all. And so much of cinematography, I always say, is about contrast. So if in the absence of shadows, you either have to create shadows or you have to find color contrast. Like, you need to have some kind of separation. It's not good to have someone with the exact same skin tone, having a certain skin tone standing against a wall that's the same skin tone, wearing a wardrobe that's the same skin tone. It just becomes very flat, right? So the advice I would have for overcast scenarios, which like a lot of you, if you're watching this in like England, you're dealing with that more than you're ever dealing with direct sun. Is negative fill, which you guys have a great video on already. You can do a lot when you watch a show like Game of Thrones. Half the stuff you're seeing that happens in above the wall is shot in an overcast scenario. I believe mostly in Ireland, and what they're doing half the time is putting up like a big black. They're maybe throwing in some light, but also putting up like a big black sheet to just take away as much light as possible.
give it some shape.
Yeah, and I've done it in subtle enough ways where like, if I want somebody to have a jawline, I might just bring in a little bit of black right here, just so that there's more of a shadow right here. You know what I mean? Or the cheekbones, you put in the black right here, and it just shapes it just a little bit.
That's nice.
Whatever you can do to sort of create some direction again, because it's really all in your control. Yeah. But overcast, it's funny I don't know about you, when I graduated film school, I thought overcast was the best because it was easiest to expose,
That's what I heard the most, because
Yeah.
it's like, it's the least contrast, so you have more
Right.
control over exposure, but then it's like, control over what? It's all the same
Yeah,
thing,
and
so it's not interesting.
It becomes really hard to make an interesting image, actually,
Yeah, you can't, there's nothing to adjust.
Right.
It's all flat.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you don't have control. It's like an illusion of control.
Exactly.
It's like nothing's overexposed or underexposed, but nothing can be moved around or fudged or nudged around at all either. So
Right.
it's like you're stuck.
Your best bet is to bring lights in and to shape it with negative fill. Yeah, so now I like the sunny days. I like what you can do with them.
That's good.
Magic Hour is a similar kind of thing. I know we didn't say much about Magic Hour, or Golden Hour, if you will, but that's in part because I don't think you should be wasting too much time with equipment during Golden Hour. Like maybe you bring a bounce in or something like that, but like if you only have 15 minutes, 20 minutes sometimes where the light is like that, it's sort of, and it's already so beautiful, then you should use it for a specific purpose. And it's kind of like overcast light in a lot of ways. It's nothing direct about it, you know, there's not really many shadows. It has a completely different color spectrum than overcast light, but yeah, it's pretty different. Yeah.
Do you, I don't know if this is just me, I was thinking, I got up really early this morning.
Yeah.
And I feel like the equivalent of Magic Hour at the beginning of the day, like the
twilight.
The twilight dawn, also has its own unique color as
Yeah.
opposed to the sunset, post-sunset Magic
Right.
Hour, and it's a completely different, more like milkier, bluer.
It depends on what part of the world you're in, but I
Yeah,
find it's
for
generally
sure.
cooler. Yeah, definitely cooler. And you get more like magentas in the evening and oranges and all that stuff. It's like been heated up or something. That's my favorite time of day personally. Like some of the most gorgeous stuff, like what we were talking about in Sicario, that shot looks like, you know, like any of that stuff. Twilight's just amazing. It's such a beautiful time of day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
I
see
feel
it
like
so rarely too.
such a nerd. I was carpooling with Anthony here, and I was like, "Can you see how there's like gold over there, but it's like a pale gold, and then there's this light blue." And Anthony's colorblind, so he's like,
You're just torturing
I'm trying
me.
to drive.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what? So I'm just like, oh no. That's what happens when you start shooting and lighting, is you start like noticing these nerdy things.
Yeah, it's true.
good.
I know, it's funny, like when the more you guys pay attention to light, and this is a syndrome I definitely felt in like college, the more I when I would get off a set, all I could think about was light. Meaning like I would look at the fluorescence in my apartment and I'd be looking at, you know, like which is good. You gotta get your head in that mindset. You're thinking about the headlights coming through the windows and everything, but
Yeah.
you just sort of get in that mindset. Yeah.
One thing that just popped in my head when you brought up the negative fill with like jawline and cheeks and stuff like that is, and I actually want to do a whole tutorial on this later, as filmmakers, most of the time our subject is humans and the human face,
Right.
and human skin tone and human, like, just learning how to shoot the human face.
Right.
And how light interacts with it, how light interacts with different skin tones. Because the thing that I noticed in film school, and especially looking at when we were shooting on film and doing film stocks, is film stocks were all geared towards pale skin.
Right. Yeah.
And
Caucasian skin tone.
Caucasian skin tone, and that's what all the tests were, and like that's how you learned how to light and how to do contrast. And there's this amazing conversation right now with Bradford Young and Ava DuVernay and how to shoot black skin and brown skin and dark skin, and looking at, so they have yellow undertones or pink undertones or blue undertones, and like that is something that I wish film school had delved into more.
Right.
And like, what have you noticed as you've been learning as a DP, and like, what have you noticed about the human face that has kind of struck you, I guess, is my question.
Well, yeah, you make an interesting point. I realized about 2 years in when I started shooting that like cinematographers very often are not necessarily about just simple overall photography. Like 90% of what we do is shoot the human face. And so much of what we learn to do is how to shape it and make it the most flattering or unflattering, as it were, how to hide the eyes, anything involving that. So yeah, you're right. That's the tricky thing, is learning how to expose, like how to light and expose for different skin tones. Like some people, for example, say that with black skin, using like a gold reflector is stronger because it brings out more of like the caramel tones and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's like I would say talk to your gaffer a lot of the time. People have, there's a lot of different things going around. I've been reading the stuff from Bradford Young about, I think you kind of have to experiment with it yourself in terms of skin tone. But
Bradford Young did Selma and Dear White People and a bunch of, he's just so good.
yeah, he's amazing. Yeah, he's the DP in residence at UCLA now too. So those students are lucky.
Jealous.
I'm so jealous.
Really
Oh my
cool.
God, just be able to bend his
Go
ear.
sit in on one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna crash it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but
We
yeah,
got some friends there, right?
Yeah. Maybe.
They don't know we went to USC, right? I just blew it. Anyways,
I was a Bruin.
I find
there you go.
we're almost talking about lighting the human face, and so I would say this, much to the same way that a rule with directing actors is that you should direct each person differently, because each actor has a different style and a different history, and there's a way you can, some people want to reference Steven Spielberg has some amazing stuff talking about that on YouTube too. But I think as a DP, you should light people differently based on their. So for example, I won't get specific as to which actor I'm talking about, but like an actor who has really deep set eyes, I would generally bring their key light down a little bit so I can still get light into their eyes and create some contrast. An actor who maybe doesn't have a strong jawline, you bring their key light up so that it creates kind of like what you see on me, like a shadow right here that sort of separates them so they're not just blending, you know what I mean? You light each actor differently, you know. Older actors you might light more flattering, or you might light with hard light because you want them to look older and you want to play their age
deeper
up.
wrinkles and contrast and depth and more interesting.
I remember hearing a story from a gaffer friend of mine who worked with Harris Savides before he passed away on like this L'Oreal commercial, and that like he was amazed when he looked over at him working with the key grip, because the key grip, like they were shooting something like I think Elizabeth Banks, and they had like a tiny little finger and dot, which is like a tiny little black like slab. They just were placing it with a C-stand, and like if Elizabeth was right here, they just right there is perfect. And they would step back, and that was it. But just that alone was making such a huge difference for them in terms of the shape of what was happening on her face. You know what I mean? So it does get that particular.
Yeah.
Especially in makeup and
cosmetic
commercials.
stuff, yeah.
It's very
sure.
specific.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I feel like I've heard stories about certain actors who have like their own sort of lighting person, or like even a person to like approve like a shot.
Yeah.
Or the way an actor is
Well,
lit.
they say part of the reason that back in the day, like Marlene Dietrich would date her cameraman, like would marry her cameraman, and like a lot of these people would bring their same cameraman on every single set, was because image was so important. It was so technical, and they needed to have somebody who was they could rely on to always make them look their best, you know, especially as they got older and all that stuff. Side note, apparently Marlene Dietrich had what was called the Dietrich lens. You guys ever hear about this?
No.
It was a 50 mil. It was a 50 mil that just squeezed you a little bit.
Oh.
Just made you look slightly skinnier than everyone else, but they could only use it for her close-ups.
So that's that 10 pounds. Is that the 10 pounds like
Taking
thing?
off the
Yeah.
10 pounds
Taking
from
off the 10
TV.
pounds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Just narrows it up
She's
just a
got
little
her
I
bit.
own
want one of
lens.
those.
Right?
I didn't know that existed.
Me
great.
too.
We get a little squeezed. Yeah.
But yeah, it used to go that way. It's not the same economy anymore. Now it's usually the director, but it used to be like, no, I'll only be filmed if that person's filming me. Wow. Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's nice to know as an actor, and this is another idea I have later on, which is what is the relationship between an actor and a DP? Because there is kind of, you want separation, but then again, the actor wants to know that they're being taken care of and that they're, you know, being portrayed well, and it's just like, what are the boundaries there and that kind of stuff too. So I always thought that was super interesting. It's just like, is there a relationship there? Does it depend on the actor? Depend on the director?
There is, yeah. It's funny. I mean, on VGHS, I got to build up like a lot of trust with the actors over time, and I remember getting to a point where it was like, okay, they're just going to rely on me. They're not going to ask a million questions about it, you know. Very often, some actors, especially people who are more physical comedy oriented, will ask what the size of the shot is, and you see it what a massive effect it has on them. If you let them know it's here to here, they're going to move around and use that space. If you let them know it's here, they're going to act essentially with their minds and let it just sort of play. But I heard a really interesting thing from an actress once. She said that like the first thing she looks for when a take is done is just like even out of the periphery of her eye that person's smiling behind the camera. Like that's the first signal that like, oh, that was good. You know, you're just looking for that. It's sort of like the audience, you know what I mean? It's the first person to see the movie. And yeah, of course you want to know what the director thinks as well, but you are subconsciously sort of thinking about like, oh, I must have done something. And usually, ideally, the director and DP are so synced up that they're both going to be like I'm sure you experienced it, like with Matt and Freddie, we usually would look at each other and just be like, yep, that was it. That was one. We all know.
That was the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we derailed a little bit, but I feel like even when you're shooting outside, pay attention to how your actor's face looks, and also don't make that face after a take.
Right.
Because it's bad.
Yeah. And in overcast light, you can still do something. Just use negative fill.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know in the comments, the biggest comment we got in the comment section for that video was, how do I do night shoots? How do I shoot in low light? Blah, blah, blah. And we have been talking about this extensively, and we've actually shot The Horn, which was our Halloween short. We have other shorts coming up that are similar to that, and we have different types of low light and different things like that we're going to break down and actually go through that. So that is coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share that with you guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hang in there.
Thanks, John.
More's coming.
Great. I
Nice.
love talking camera stuff with John because I'm surrounded by directors here, and I'm just like, I need to talk about filters and lights and color, and it's just really nice. So.
I always love nerding out with you, Lauren.
Yay! All right, thanks, guys.